changes in our spreadsheet today. So that's why it's not included. It's an item that came up after print.
Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I had mentioned earlier that I was not in support of the $6,000 additional cost for lobbying, and I think it would be prudent for us as a group to maybe separate our membership and the discussion about that additional ask for the $6,000. And since we've deferred it to today's discussion, I'd like to separate the two issues and deal with the $6,000 initially, and then we can review membership and the invitation to attend in Quebec. And the invitation to attend the meeting in Quebec, that's going to be inclusive of the $13,900 that is appearing in our budget document before us. So if it's in order, I'd like to move that the $6,000 not be contributed to FCM for the purposes of lobbying in the next election cycle.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Columbus. Discussions on the motion. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. We were just discussing this. I'm hoping that for the record, staff could validate or confirm to us that by pulling the $6,000, we are still eligible for funding. We are still members. That's accurate. Thank you.
Through the mayor to Councillor Martin. So the $6,000 was a voluntary contribution towards the objective that FCM is trying to do. I don't think they expect all 362 municipalities to contribute. So no, there's no strings attached.
Councillor Columbus.
Yes, James, I thought the travel trip to the conference for FCM, I thought it was not included. I thought that's over and above cost. Or is it included in the 13.9? Or is it over and above the 13.9 to go to that conference in Quebec?
Through the mayor to Councillor Columbus, the $13,900 includes the conference.
Oh, it does? Okay, thanks.
Any further discussions? Sorry, James, I just want to be absolutely clear. So there is no detriment to us applying for any future grants if we do not pay this membership fee?
That's a different question, Madam Mayor. The $6,000 is to submit to a advocacy fund.
Gotcha.
The membership, if we don't pay, if we decide not to be a member, then we won't be able to apply for the grants that the FCM offers.
And the membership is the $13,900 or $13,900 less travel expenses, less Montreal, and so on?
So $10,000 is the membership, or $10,100, sorry, and then the balance is whatever costs are incurred in going to that conference. It includes mileage allowance and other things of that nature.
And was this one of the ones when we had the discussion about the $33,900 not being reflected under the CAO budget as council approved initiatives? Can you remember, is this one of the ones that was broken up between the different groups?
Yes, Madam Mayor, this was split between the CAO's office and the mayor's budget.
Okay. Between the CAOs and council services?
The budget, Mayor and council services had, I believe, 12,000.
Okay. Okay, any further
Yes.
discussion? Okay, so we are voting, to be clear, the motion is that council not provide an additional $6,000 to FCM for the purposes of lobbying. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I think the next item that would be prudent to discuss is the fact that the $13,900 does contain actually two tickets to the annual conference for FCM that's going to be held in Montreal, Quebec. Originally, I believe we've signed up our mayor and our CAO to attend, and I was hoping to hear from our group here and also from staff their recommendations. I think it is important for us to have representation at that conference, whether it be a council representative, our mayor, or someone from our senior leadership team. This is our opportunity to lobby the lobby group, or at least participate in that conference, and I do think it'd be a useful endeavor for a fact-finding mission to find out more about FCM and bring those experiences back for our council to consider. So I think what we need to do is determine, do we want 2 tickets, 1, or are we just happy paying our membership dues and sending our regrets for the upcoming conference?
Discussions? Councillor Van Passen.
Madam Mayor, I'd be quite content to pay the membership fee and send our regrets and not go there. I looked up some of the things on the website. They have just about all that information. I'm not sure what you're going to gain by showing up in Quebec and glad hand and with all the crowd there. So that would be my suggestion, or would you like that as a motion?
Maybe we can just hear from some other people if they want to chime in on that. Councillor Taylor?
Have we ever had a representative go? This was a new last year, right?
Asking the wrong girl.
Sorry. Through the chair to staff. Have we had a representative go to this conference before?
I believe this is the first conference. We just became members last year.
Okay.
To staff, would you believe, do you feel it would increase chances in terms of grants and that?
From my experience of going to these sort of things, I haven't been to an AMO or a Roma conference. That's where the ministers, you can talk to them directly. However, there is a lot of value to going to these types of events. They offer excellent training sessions, and you get a lot of inside information. So yes, I believe there's value in this.
Okay. Councillor Martin?
With that being said, then I would agree and suggest that someone attend. And additionally, I believe that Councillor Columbus was mentioning that the mayor did attend last year.
Councillor Columbus?
I'm pretty certain that it was in Nova Scotia last year, and I believe that the CAO at the time and the mayor attended that event. I see some head shaking by...
Through the mayor, yes, sorry, you're refreshing my memory. Actually, when they went, they were able to tour a couple of facilities there as well, related to recreation facilities.
Further discussion? Anybody for a motion? Councillor Geisens? That we approve or not approve? That we approve. Okay. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin? Oh,
Just a little bit of clarification. If it's already in print,
we don't have to go through it.
If you want to take it away, then we need a
Gotcha.
motion. Yeah.
sounds good. On we go. The Telecommunications and Advisory Committee and the other, where the $20,000 for both of those committees, given that they meet relatively infrequently, what are the costs that are included in that $20,000?
I can probably assist. Those costs were set up to allow the committees to go tour sites or take training without coming forward to council. I think my initial proposal to the CAO was that the Telecommunications Advisory Committee be provided $3,000 and that RFAB be provided $5,000. So this was, the county manager thought that was, CAO felt that that was insufficient and that they should each have $10,000. So certainly there, if council does decide to address and reduce that amount, all it does is mean that if they require further funds, if they expend the full amount, they're required to come here and ask you again for the money, but that would just be potentially a 2 or 3 week delay, and so they'd have to know what they're going to do 3 or 4 weeks in advance prior to doing it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gazal. Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I would be willing to put forth a motion to cut both of those costs, the telecommunications to the 5,000, as our clerk has stated, as well as the RFAB down to 3,000.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councilor Michelle? Any further discussion? Councilor Taylor?
Those were the right cuts to it was 5,000 for telecommunications and 3,000 for RFAB, or was that the other way around? Your recommendation?
I think RFAB might need more money, so the RFAB might need the 5,000, and telecommunications advisory might need the 3.
Can we amend that? Is that?
Thank you very much, yes.
Councilor Michelle?
I'm hoping that we can amend that back. Councillor Martin's original motion, she might have made that figure in error, possibly, but I think that the Telecommunications Committee should get 5,000, just to have it there, just because I do believe that this year, and I'm kind of speculating a little bit, but I'm hoping that from a previous motion put forward by Council, that I am going to be the successful nominee to the SWIFT board. I'm hoping that there will be a more real connection between that committee and that board of directors.
If I could just interrupt you and jump in, there was 2,000 additional, I believe, that was approved or already, right? Or is that form part of this?
Through you, that's 2,000 annual membership that IT has generously.
In another portion of the budget.
In another portion.
So there is
Yes.
2,000 there.
And I understand that, Madam Mayor. I'm just thinking that if we already had it in there and we were already cutting that budget in half, I just thought that figure would be probably a little bit more practical in terms of making those connections. I guess my question then would be, why would the RFAB board require that much more?
I believe the RFAB board, the reason that Mr. Grizel was perhaps suggesting a slightly higher number was because they already are planning some trips to tour a number of the facilities across Ontario with the entire group to be able to see what other facilities offer so that, we make sure that we're kind of bringing the best proposal forward here. I don't even, we have 1 day plan for that. Is that going to use 5,000 even on its own? No. So, I hope that we even come in far less than that amount. With the telecommunications, what would be your thoughts in terms of?
Well, my thoughts were something very similar to that. There would be maybe a benefit to being able to tour some other jurisdictions that have the type of, specifically fiber optic network that we are seeking, and that might be required. Again, I don't anticipate necessarily using all of that, but I just thought it might be simpler and more practical to have it there in the first place.
Any further discussion, Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through the chair to our council, I'd like to propose a friendly amendment to have 5,000 for each board. I think that's splitting the difference. It's not underfunding either board. And again, if we're coming in under target, that's great, and that's a good outcome to be driving towards. We've halved the budgets, and I was just wondering if that would be amenable to the mover.
If I may ask a question of staff, through the mayor to staff, if the additional funding is not spent, what then happens to that funding?
Mr. Johnson?
Through the mayor to staff, I'm just wondering if we come under budget on the telecommunications and RFAB board, what happens to the funding if we put aside $5,000 and we don't spend it? What happens with that funding?
This is through the mayor to Councillor Martin. I apologize. I didn't answer or hear you the first time. So what would happen if we didn't spend the money? It would be along with all the other line items, whether we go over or under budget, it would all add up down to a surplus or deficit at the end of the year. And so it would contribute to a surplus.
Okay, I am okay with a friendly amendment to $5,000 for both telecommunications and RFAB.
Okay, so motion's moved by Councillor Martin, Councillor Michele seconded that. All those in favor? And that's been carried.
For the CAO's office, there's no NBIs requested for 2019. So if you move to page 2011, we'll be moving into ECS. And page 11, 12, and 13 are the CAIs, if you have any questions. If there's no...
Sorry, I was just going to point something out to
Yeah.
council. One of the CAIs is a direct result of new provincial legislation related to the remuneration of councillors. So just another pressure we have from the province. Just wanted to point that out.
I just have a question in regards to page 13. Can you sort of elaborate on what's happening here with the interdepartmental recoveries and
No communications?
I guess what I don't understand is how we have an interdepartmental charge and yet the levy impact is only 11,300.
Okay, Catherine's going to explain.
Catherine Fanning will explain in detail on what that is, but at a very high level, we are making sure we take advantage of all the provincial funding that we can. That's part of it, but Catherine will definitely expand on that.
Thank you. So within this council-approved initiative, what we've done is we've taken pieces and parts from different areas within the corporation to form the communications department. So that was a report that was approved last year at council. What we've done, because we aren't exactly sure how this department is going to support all of the other areas within the operations, we've taken some staff and their operating costs, and what we've done is we've charged those departments back for exactly what we've removed. So our assumption right now is that we're actually going to support the departments in the same way that they were supported within the prior year. There will be efficiencies created within this new department, and we are seeing how the support falls out. So the charges to the external departments may be a little bit different in reality when we do expense them in the current year, but our assumption is that the people are going to complete the same tasks with some efficiencies in the area. So what we've done, for example, we've taken over two people from health, and what we've done is we've charged them back for 100% of the costs we've removed from that area.
Okay, and the 11,300?
So the 11,300 is the additional staffing costs expected from what we've removed from the other areas.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is actually one I had flagged to try to get an explanation on the interdepartmental charges. You know, it looks nice that we got 4 full-time equivalent employees for 11,300, but the interdepartmental charges, they're levy dollars from some other department, so the total amount of 374 is levy dollars, is it not?
What was the final number you gave?
Well, the total expenditure is 374,700,
Yeah,
which
I
is
would-
about right for 4 employees.
Yeah.
That money didn't.
So for the
magically
total
appear.
costs within the communications department, I don't have the page number handy with me, but if you look in your proposed binder, the big binder under Employee and Corporate Services, and if someone can help me out with the page number, there is a division summary for for the communications department. So what shows in there is the total expenses that we believe it will take to run the department. And what the initiative is showing that we believe it's only going to cost $11,300 more within 2019 to actually have this initiative, the new department, created.
Four 39 is the last page of that section.
Yes, so it is 4-39.
Well, right here at the top, it has salaries and benefits. It's 336,800, and then we're seeing that interdepartmental recovery further down of 356.
So in the council-approved column, you are seeing, yes, the salaries that we do believe that it will cost to run the communications department. In other areas within your binder, you will see the offsetting negative brackets, removing those salaries out of those areas. So for example, in QPAP, under Health and Social Services, you'll see actually negative staffing coming out, salary and benefit costs.
How many people are in the communications department currently?
So, if council wishes, we do have copies of the original report that went to council as well for distribution. So the original proposal was to take 4.5 FTEs that, in our view, were doing some aspects of what is communications work across the corporation. And so that council report made the recommendation to centralize all those positions in one place, call it the communications department, and then reduce the FTE strength from 4.5 positions into 4 positions. Under the assumption, as Catherine alluded to earlier, that as we roll out the centralized department, we should be able to deliver those centralized communications services hopefully more effectively and more efficiently, and then see opportunities perhaps to do more in some of the other areas.
To my knowledge, we currently have an external posting for somebody for the communications department, though, don't we? So that kind of isn't the argument that we've drawn people from other departments.
To clarify, and maybe I misspoke, we took the positions from the other departments, the questions surrounding the specific human beings pertaining to those positions. That's a separate conversation.
Oh, I see, okay. So how many, sorry, or Councilor Rabbits, my apologies. How many people do we have currently actively employed in the communications department?
The communications department currently has human beings in 3 out of 4 positions, and you're seeing that 4th position advertised.
Councilor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Along those same lines on 4-38, we have upcoming main objectives, hiring and onboarding 2 communications specialists and 1 graphic designer. So if my math adds up, that's 3 full-time equivalents. I was wondering, where's the 4th? And which one of those main objectives are in fact filled currently?
So the 4th position is our Director of Corporate Communications, Mr. Matt Terry. And so the 1 communications specialist has been hired, and 1 graphics designer has been hired, and an additional communications specialist. That's the ad that the mayor alluded to earlier.
I don't mean to be too rough, but I find a 4-person communications department at this point pretty extensive. I think it's great that we were able to reduce some staff in other departments, but to then go and add 4 new positions alone strictly in this department when we're facing an 8.6% tax hike, I don't know. I find that a lot for communications. Any thoughts, Councilor Martin?
I would second that. I would like to see a new department come out running with a smaller amount of staff, assess the workload, provide services to the public, have council assess at that point before adding members onto a team. Just my thoughts.
Councillor Rabbits?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Through the chair to staff, I would like to know what the financial impact would be of not hiring an additional communications specialist and going with a staff complement of 3 total for the communications department.
Through the mayor to Councillor Rabbits, that's a difficult question to answer off the top of my head because some of that staff time would be spent on health and social services where there would be funding for that work. And then I wouldn't want to, I'm not sure about divulging, well, I'm not sure what the posting salary is, but basically it would be whatever that salary is on the posting, less whatever funding we would calculate on what that person would be doing related to various funded areas within Norfolk County.
Thank you. And to follow up, would it be sufficient to say that the council-approved initiative that we're reviewing for 11,300 would be removed in addition to the salaries and the benefits of the individual? So if we're looking to cut the 11,300 that we have here in this document, reducing the staff complement to 3 would achieve that outcome?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rabbit. So when the report was initially presented to council, we basically at a level, we calculated the positions' salaries and benefits that would be removed, and the newly formed positions' salaries and benefits that we would be replacing them with. And there was, depending on what step they got hired or whatnot, there was a range of a savings of about 5,000 or 6,000 to, as what you see here. So again, if we were to decide not to hire that 4th, again, I wouldn't hazard to guess whether that would eliminate the 11,300 or not without doing a little bit of analysis at a time. I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information.
Councillor Columbus?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This communication department is a process in transition, and I know the director of communication, Matt Terry, I guess, he hasn't been there that long. I think he's only came on the job about 6 months ago? Yeah. How many? 3 months ago. So he's new. And so there's still 3 positions to fill. Is that the way I read it?
Just one.
One? Okay. What is the rationale? What was the rationale for having 4 FTEs in this department? Can you clarify that for council? Why we needed 4?
I think it's a very broad question. We did an organizational analysis, and a variety of general managers did quite a bit of work looking at the type of work that was being done across the corporation by several positions, graphics design work, communications type of work, and then looking at some areas from a gapping perspective. Not from a gapping perspective, I'm sorry, things that we weren't doing in our engagement with social media and how we communicate with the public, and our branding and sort of some of those areas. And we looked at it and we came to the conclusion, and I think I said 4.5, but it was actually 4.6 FTEs that were doing that work across the corporation before. And so we looked at all these things that we were doing across the corporation, and we thought that we could do it better in a centralized way, and we thought that we could do it 0.6 FTEs less. So this proposal that went to council that was approved last year already reduced the staffing complement by 0.6 human beings. And so that was our sort of kickoff year in this regard in getting some of these positions in play, and concerns surrounding whether we could do what 4.6 people were doing before now with 4, but part of that, what we were looking to see in that first year of implementation. The broad spectrum of what these functions have historically done for the corporation ranged the gamut of communications with the media, branding, graphics design, a lot of the guides that are distributed across the recreation guides, all those types of things, both the content and the graphics design and the layout within them are all things that people worked on in the health and social services area. Some of the staff were involved in providing critical communication surrounding any outbreaks or health-related information that we're actually obligated to provide, and if there's any sort of further clarification with that, you can ask Ms. Miranda on those pieces. But it's really a really broad mishmash of work that was done before that we thought we could do better instead of 4.6 people with 4.
So what are the duties of that fourth position? Can you explain that? And it's not, is it advertised so far or not? Or posted?
Sorry, and just to clarify, the fourth position, you mean the one that's currently posted, the communications specialist?
Okay,
Job?
so you have a fourth position that's currently posted?
Correct.
Okay, I didn't know that. And what are the duties of that position?
So the two communications specialists were really envisioned to be communications generalists. So strong on writing skills, so helping with the drafting of media releases and media relations. When we're up and ready and running, working on social media communications and digital marketing, as well as probably some communications project management, so helping out with various areas of the corporation in their communications planning and our execution of communications projects. That's sort of the high-level look at both of those communication specialist positions.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Passen?
Just a follow-up to one of the questions. I did do the math from our budget document. $69 million in salaries, 781 employees. An average employee costs us $88,811.69. So 9 employees is 1% of our tax levy.
Thank you. Councillor Hoffman?
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so just to clarify, so I understand, this is, obviously, it's a new department. It was seen as a need to amalgamate services that were being provided all over the county, correct? It was being done by the equivalent of 4.6. It's been reduced to 4. The net impact on the levy is the 11,000 figure, correct? I just want a synopsis. Yep, okay. And I do recall that this was something that was discussed during the election campaign as well by many people in terms of some of the mismatch of social media and the transparency piece through to our constituents from Norfolk County, and that it was something that people were looking for. They were looking for a more streamlined process, that information was shared, where it was gathered, and how it was done. So I do recall those distinct discussions. So thank you.
Councillor Van Passen? Councillor Martin? Or did you want to have that question?
I'm
mean-
assuming that somebody will think up an answer sooner or later.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get the communications department to put out a media release.
So, thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me speak. So, interdepartmental charges, the only way that they would have an effect on the levy is if they involved another budget, like the rate budget. There is no levy impact. If you see an interdepartmental charge like this in one particular cost center, there's an offset somewhere else. So Norfolk County as a whole, it's a net zero impact on these interdepartmental charges. So the reason, however, in this case, we're actually ahead because we're doing interdepartmental charges to the Health and Social Services where we get provincial funding. So the county then benefits from that.
Can I follow up?
Of course.
Previously, on one of the slides, there's $19 million of interdepartmental charges. It's 8% of our budget. Where does that money magically come from?
So interdepartmental, through the mayor to Councillor Van Passen, interdepartmental charges is not a cash exercise. It's a distribution of costs to the right areas exercise on an accrual basis, if you will. It's a way to make sure certain areas are reflected of the true costs of what that area does. So it's no different in the private sector. If you have, you know, a manufacturing organization that makes grapple grommets, they'll try to incorporate the cost of their HR department, their finance department, and other administration areas into the cost of those items.
I'm just a
You
little
have the floor.
slow
Yes,
here.
you just carry on.
So Public Works needs a little advice from the finance department. So the treasurer's going to write a report that takes a couple hours of his time. He's going to send Public Works a bill for $100 for a couple hours of his time. So Public Works pays $100 back over to finance. Who paid the original $100 of your salary to be able to bill that back and forth? Like, we didn't make money.
So, through the mayor to Councillor Van Passen, if perhaps a better analogy is if Public Works needed accounting information and they hired someone externally, then that would affect the levy. Absolutely, they would be hiring someone externally to do that. However, because we're using the in-house treasurer, then there wouldn't be a cash transaction. But because Public Works use some of finance's time, then we want to make sure we reflect that cost in that area.
Just to kind of follow along with Councillor Van Passen with the interdepartmental charges, I mean, it's a little bit concerning when you look at the proposed levy operating budget by department summary for corporate communications, you see zero net levy impact on that end, despite, you know, council-approved initiatives being included in there, despite 4 new employees being added in there, and yet it makes it seem as though there's nothing to the department because all of those revenues just balance out. And $370,000 or whatever, 300 and change, you know, that's a lot of outside as well. You know, there's a lot of businesses in town. I think this again begs the question, is Norfolk County in the graphic design business? Or, you know, are we providing municipal services? And while I appreciate we have some communications to put out there and some level of maintenance on a website and so on, this concerns me a little bit. And especially when it's showing zero impact on the net levy requirement, and it was a very public that this was Mr. Cribbs's, you know, big project was the creation of the communications department, and it's the only department that shows that has zero impact, and I think it does have an impact.
Madam Mayor, there are other areas that have zero impact, and the reason why we do that is because there are some cost centers where insurance, for example, hopefully I'm not misquoting insurance a little bit, but I'm pretty sure we also charge out all the insurance costs through interdepartmental charges to other areas. And so our insurance cost center nets to, it does net, okay, thank you, Diane, it does net to zero. There are examples of cost centers where we want to make sure that the costs are distributed to the areas that use that service. And so corporate communications is an example of that. They don't provide any service to themselves. They provide service to health and social services, to tourism, to all these other areas. So we want to make sure that those costs are reflected in those areas rather than their own.
So in the beginning, when I, provided everybody with a copy of the 2017 levy operating budget, and it showed that breakdown of, columns like materials and supplies, is there a breakdown then with interdepartmental charges that would show us specifically how much each department is spending in the communications department?
Yes, we can definitely
So
get that information.
maybe as we come back, at this point, perhaps we could deal with the 11,300, depending on how people felt, and then we could come back to this issue again when we look at it on a departmental basis. I'll give it to you in just one second, Councillor Martin, just one more question. Is this then the extent, I've also heard comments from the public that we do still have some communications work going on in other departments. Is that not true then? All of our graphics work, all of our website work is all contained within the communications department now? Or do we still have some coming out of tourism and ECDev and?
So from a project timeline perspective, if you imagine A as the starting point where everything is sort of spread out all over the place and everybody's doing things in a decentralized manner, and Z being the end result where everything is centralized under sort of one leader of a function, we're probably sort of 70% down that particular road. And so some of the things that I think you're talking about was the realization that, perhaps we had a variety of work even from a graphics design perspective that could be done quicker, more efficiently centrally. That's why you only have one graphics designer, where in the past there were several FTEs provided for that function. And so because we're in this transition stage, some of the functions have begun to transition to the central team, and sort of we're I would guess about 70% down that line. And as sort of we continue, the expectation is that all of those will come within the confines of the department, and then we will look for opportunities to enhance on those services and the way that we deliver some of those functions and sort of any additional ones, that communication with citizens, the social media engagement, whatever that looks like.
So a chunk in the other departments will be interdepartmental charges, and then we're going to see what a chunk under services is advertising or something? If we're paying any outside firms to do some work? Is that where it would fall in? Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. As a general point, I can see the benefits of this, and I certainly spoke to having better communication and engagement through social media. However, I still believe that 3 staff members to this department is a win, so I would like to move to cut the 11.3 from the budget.
Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Rabbits. Any further discussion? Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you. I also just wanted to speak to the SLT priority ranking. It is 3. We were elected to make some tough decisions, and I feel that this is one of those tough decisions. I'd like to start making these earlier on. We're going to get through a lengthy document here, and just need to acknowledge that, we were elected to make some tough decisions, including cuts. Staff have already cut 0.6 from a full-time equivalency. 1.6 is what's been proposed through the motion, and I think that is in order.
Councillor Columbus.
So I'd like to ask staff about this potential cut of 11.3. The line says it comes out of salaries and benefits. What would the repercussions be? Less hours or part-time employee there? Or how are you going to handle this cut? You're cutting 0.6 already.
So, and my finance friends can help me with this. The 11,000 amount was in some respects an amount there that was not finalized pending the actual full hiring of the staff in these positions. So hypothetically speaking, if all the new individuals in those positions had salaries lower, as one would usually expect from a new incumbent, then the job rates at some of those positions, that it would actually not be an $11,000, but it would be a different amount. Now, two things are being discussed. One specifically the cut of $11,000, and then another is the cutting of an FTE. And the FTE cost is significantly more than that. It's not just $11,000 in savings. So I guess the 11,000 in of itself is kind of an amount, assuming that all the new staff start at job rates at these new positions. But if they don't, that $11,000 actually is significantly smaller than that, depending on what that salary negotiations with those employees looks like. So it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be net zero change.
So my thought was kind of that we would come back around to this when we addressed the positions as we moved through the department and to discuss that option of reducing that department. Again, I can't express it enough. The municipality, we're not in the graphics design business, and we have tons of local businesses here in Norfolk that could use the business for making pamphlets and doing this type of work. And while I appreciate the value of having some of that stuff in-house, again, we have to look at what really we're here to do as a municipal entity. Councillor Huffman.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Silchenkov, could you clarify, have interviews taken place for this position?
Yes, that has occurred.
Are you able to say if any offers have been made?
I don't have 100% answer on that. I need to get back to you probably 5 to 10 minutes, and then I'll get back to you.
Okay, so there is a possibility that this position, as it has been interviewed for, there is a possibility that there could be an offer of employment out to a potential person. The other thing, and I just want to say, is that in response to Mayor Chop's comments, I do know that there are graphic designer and printing companies in Norfolk County, but I would be hard-pressed to say that we wouldn't be able to get some of the results much less expensive in-house as opposed to going out of house for those services. So, based on my own past experience.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I wonder through to staff what the difference is between a potential extended offer and a potentially signed offer. I think we're still in a position here to, depending on the results here of Councillor Huffman's question, to make cuts. And I think that we still would have 3 staff members in this department to provide better services to the public. So my position still stands.
Okay, so Councillor Martin's motion was that the new budget initiative of $11,300 for salaries and benefits to the communications department be removed. That was seconded by Councillor Rabbits. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, Councillor Taylor?
You said that through salary negotiation, it could be a zero impact. Even with this being cut, is that still an option through negotiation?
So this is where I will have to apologize. I'm not clear on whether the intent is to cut the $11,000 or a full FTE, because a full FTE is significantly more out of the budget than the $11,000. So if the concern is specifically the additional amount, then yes, that would depend on the negotiations, and pending those, we could potentially be at a zero impact compared to what we were paying for these functions being spread out across the organization.
Councillor Martin?
To provide clarification, I am suggesting both. However, I'm suggesting tackling it in whichever order staff advises us to do so.
Okay. One point I just want to make in terms of what Councillor Huffman raised and the potential to do it for less cost in-house. I mean, that's something, on the one hand, you could say, well, because we're doing it in-house, we're realizing some efficiencies there. On the other hand, you could say that it's very unlikely that it's unionized employees outside a house. And on the other hand, as we're looking at trying to rebuild our downtowns and Simcoe, these are all these types of businesses that will help to flourish in the downtown. So even if we're getting it at the same price, it's certainly $370,000 worth of communications work. Now, do we need, somebody to maintain our website and all those kinds of things in-house? Absolutely. But I'm talking pamphlets for the health department that need printing, et cetera, So a lot of that work we're still already, and I think continuing to do out of house. So I'm just, I think that we really have to look at what we're getting for $370,000 in terms of a communications department. Councillor Columbus.
Well, I think we need more answers from Mr. Slashenkov's department there. I'd like to put a motion on the floor to defer this, put it in the parking lot, maybe come back to it tomorrow. And when we get the budget closer to being finalized,
Okay.
or whenever that is. And I know deferral takes precedence over motion, right?
You bet. Discussions on the deferral? Or I need a seconder, actually. Councillor Taylor, discussions on the deferral? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor? That's carried.
If there's no further questions on the CAIs, on page 14 are the NBIs requested for ECS, and that's page 14 to page 16. If there's no further questions at this time, we'll move to Health and Social Service.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On page 14, the programmer analysis position, I remember discussing this in the capital budget, how we got to buy $400,000 worth of new computer equipment, but now we got to spend $88,000 to look after it, or the equivalent thereof. I've never seen new equipment and technology where it ever saved any employees. It costs us more. So what specifically is this new position for?
I'll pass it over to Brent Wallace, our Director of Information Technology.
Must apologize. I still haven't figured out how to work my cell phone the county give me, so don't get too complicated on me.
We're requesting an additional programmer analyst position to deal with a number of systems that we have in place. We struggle with a lot of different areas of support. We have a lot of equipment, cell phones, email accounts, desktops, and the programmer position is more to deal with providing better output of our current systems, our current software systems. We also do we have a lot of forms, internal forms that we develop, and those forms could be better done online more efficiently. We have certain people that are more specialized in providing technical support for desktops and laptops, and they end up having to do some of our software support issues that we have. We're just going to hand out a chart right now that we've done some municipal comparisons with other municipalities with the total number of staff that they have in those departments, IT departments versus our department, versus the number of computers, the number of email accounts, and all that area that we support. And with that, the ratio of equipment is a lot higher, so we have to take on a lot more in our area, and we felt that we needed another additional position to kind of help with a lot of response times, and the program analyst position is kind of help with that area, because we do deal with a lot of support of different software systems, and we struggle sometimes just getting the proper information out of those systems because they're customized reporting that we require. And there's a lot more development that we could do with websites and so on and so forth. So it's just really what we're wanting is another FTE. We've called it a program analyst because that's kind of the specialty we want in-house. But that's what we're kind of looking for, is someone to help with overall support of all the different types of systems we have within the county.
Can I follow up on that? These numbers are worse than the ones I pulled out of the report. We've got 772 full-time equivalent employees, but we got 1,186 email accounts. We got more computers than we have employees. We've got 350 supported smartphones and tablets. We have more equipment than what we got. People Maybe it's time to get rid of some of the equipment and not have as many of them. Maybe that's the job that this person should do.
Well, I agree with you as well. I think, the point, to a degree, I mean, we do need to support technology and so on. So at the same time, I appreciate that the IT department needs more people, but then there has to be a reduction in people somewhere else, because the whole point of it is to facilitate processes and make them easier and more automatic, so we're not having as many people. But I'm not seeing those reductions anywhere. Councillor Martin.
I do have one question as well as one general comment. In general, I support building a strong team for Norfolk County to move forward with and assist with council and assist residents. However, I'm just not sold that this is the time in the year to be doing it. And although we're talking about one staff member here, there are additional email addresses that need to be set up and additional county devices that need to be given to these new staff members, and it just perpetuates this cycle where we're asking for staff to then manage these things. So as a general comment, I do want to just express that I'm not completely sold that this is the time and the year to do it. I do have one question through the mayor to staff. One of Norfolk County strategies is to provide further online services to residents. Could you speak specifically to some of those services that would be enhanced by this position?
Right now, we have a lot of different forms that we provide on the county's site that people have to print off and they have to complete and they have to bring them in. And I can't give you an exact example of one form because there's a number on them. If we had an internal position, we could look at those forms to be done more online and submitted possibly online. So we're not necessarily having people to be tasked to come into a facility to do that. That's one area that we're looking at. Other areas would be to do with just basically customer relations management. When people are having a complaint, being able to track that complaint better and providing that in detail to those people that, this has been taken care of. We do that some now through emails and so on and so forth, but we could get more into providing that detail a little bit better.
Hold on. Councillor Martin, or Huffman?
Thank you, Mayor Chop. Just to clarify, this question is actually for you, Mayor Chop. Earlier today, we had talked about, you had mentioned in your opening remarks about basically a hiring freeze, correct?
Correct.
So would a fair assumption be is that for the most part, as we go through here, I guess essential services are a different thing, so it wouldn't really necessarily be reflected here in the budget. So to my colleagues, is it fair enough that we, as we go through this, if we're looking at any new positions, it's a straight no?
I would support that. Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mayor Chop. I would just like to respond through the chair to Councillor Huffman that I think we do need to utilize the information, the resources that we have in our booklets in order to make that determination. There's a priority ranking system, 1, 2, or 3. You mentioned essential services. Program analyst, in my opinion, does not fall into one of those higher categories of a 1 or a 2. It is listed here as a 3, as not being necessarily an essential service. So if we're looking at what we can cut and what is going to hurt in terms of reducing services and the ability of our staff to manage their various portfolios, what I would like to do is move this item and defer it for the 2020 budget. And in effect, that would be a hiring freeze for this particular position.
And just in response to Councillor Rabbits, I do understand in terms of the rankings and paid due diligence to that going through it. Just to reiterate, when you look at the council remuneration, the 1/3 part that needed to be picked up, that was ranked a 3. So, I mean, the rankings, there's a place for them, but it doesn't always necessarily give you the accuracy. They had to do that or there wouldn't have been anything, so.
And I would like to respond through the chair. I appreciate that. My point being that I don't want to support a hiring freeze across the board, but if we're talking about items ranked priority 3, in my opinion, those would be an area to start. I would not be supporting a hiring freeze necessarily across the board without reviewing each and every position that we're discussing. So I just kind of wanted to separate it. I want to talk about the program analysts now, not referring to any other positions.
So to be clear with Councillor Rabbits, I mean, there's 30 open positions right now, and some of those open positions arguably we are coping just fine without them being filled. And so, as part of the hiring freeze, we have legislated required positions, so that wouldn't fit into that. But, we could look at saying, okay, we're going to have a hiring freeze as they have done in years past. This isn't something new. And then if you really need to have that position filled, then come to council on an as-needed basis to demonstrate why that position is currently necessary. This is one of the bigger jumps, actually, in a long time, with the requested number of FTEs being presented year over year to council. And it happens to coincide with the same of an 8.6% increase. So that, to me, is concerning.